Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Samson's Mailbag, the podcast wherein I take listener and viewer questions, talk about some of the wider themes that are going on with the Raptors season, and just talk hoops, talk basketball. For anybody listening, remember that these are timestamped, so if you want to jump around and listen to whatever topic you want, feel free. There's a lot of wide-ranging stuff, and also remember to like, comment, and subscribe. It helps the channel. It helps us do what we want to keep doing, keeps the lights on for myself and Trey. This is also, of course, presented by Axe for people who want to smell nice. Well, there'll be a real ad read later. But I'm Samson Folk. What I wanted to talk about, the first thing really was, and I was doing a bunch of, I guess, research or looking up data on this and watching some film, is that are the Raptors ever going to be able to shoot the basketball well? And it's an interesting conversation and kind of it's about like what development looks like today and where the NBA is headed, because the Raptors are actually a top 10 team in spot up percentage or spot up, I guess, points per possession across the league. And you'd think, well, that probably means they're a good shooting team. They shoot the three out of spot ups fairly well. They shoot catch and shoot threes just a little bit below the back, I guess they're around average in the NBA. The thing that really tanks these Raptors is the fact that they are the worst, and with a bullet, the worst 3-point pull up percentage team in the NBA. They can't shoot threes. They shoot, they're 14th in pull up twos. Gradey and Scottie are doing a lot of heavy lifting there, but the Raptors, by a mile, are last in both volume and efficiency as far as 3-point pull up shooting goes. Why is this happening? Why is this interesting? And what does it mean if they could become a team that can perhaps shoot the three ball better out of the pull going forward? Yak DPOY says, glad we can't shoot. The moment the Raps start launching threes, like Boston, will be the final nail in the coffin to my NBA viewing career. We're always low on 3-point attempts. Let's keep it that way. You can be low on 3-point attempts, but you want to be making them too, is an important factor, obviously. Like if you put up a shot, you want that thing to go in. And while the Raptors, they do have like a location efficiency thing where the shots that they take are deemed valuable. They're not making the shots, which brings us into our first topic that links into the shooting. So from Cat and Bird says, I saw this tweet and it made me think about some of the Raptors players. Thoughts on this idea? And of course, it's a tweet from bball_archives, who comments in chat sometimes, agrees with my high-low passing is overrated argument. Quote, as role players have more optimized shot profiles compared to past eras, I wonder if relative true shooting becomes less of a gauge and less contextualized. I'd like to see the league average true shooting for players with a certain creation load and how young initiators compare. End quote. Great thought. It's why I'm higher on Gradey, even though Gradey's true shooting percentage is around 55%. He's considered more of a role player than like a creation star. And 55% is kind of where Scottie's been hanging out. It's kind of where RJ's been hanging out. And what the Raptors need mostly is efficiency, because they don't have it in a lot of places. But here's the thing. The Raptors are last in pull-up 3-point efficiency. They're last in pull-up 3-point volume. They have guys like Ochai Agbaji, who's still shooting 41% from three. But here's the thing. Ochai, how many pull-up threes has Ochai Agbaji hit? He's hit a lot of threes. He shot them really well. How many do we think he's hit this year? 2. And he shot 22% on his pull-up three attempts. Okay? And then middies. He's hit 5 middies at 62%. The Raptors don't have any singular player. I went and looked at all of the big names. Jamison Battle is the one guy. IQ is another guy who hasn't been playing. But the interesting thing is that IQ has been terrible shooting middies as far as, a Raptor. Like he's made 19 over his 45 games as a Raptor, and he's shooting less than 40%. He's shooting like 35%, if that. And when it comes to like Scottie and Gradey, they've done a really good job of making mid-range pull-ups, but they have no 3-point pull-up. And the reason why is that like some shots are harder than others in the NBA. And while a lot of people want to whinge a little bit about some of Gradey's offensive stuff, I disagree with it completely. However, you can complain, I think quite rightly, about Gradey's limitations defensively. The interesting thing, though, is Gradey, that 55% true shooting to me is really impressive. And the correlation of the Raptors always playing much better offensively with him on the floor is an important one. He takes the difficult shots. he affects the spacing of teams, and he makes things easier for all of his teammates. It's why he's made 40% of the total threes against zone that the Raptors have made this whole season. Just by himself, Gradey, 40%. And the Raptors are one of the 6 best teams in the NBA beating zone, 1.182 points per possession. Guys who do hard things at not the utmost efficiency is a really good thing. Pascal Siakam is a really good example of this. Right now, Pascal's efficiency has been going up and up and up because his shot chart has been getting much easier. Although it comes with less creation, less assists, less free throw attempts, and less effect on defenses overall. Of course, the Pacers are a team that they've kind of figured their way into efficient offense. They don't worry about it too much. They want him to be a cog in their machine. They want to be able to, okay, throw it in for a post up every once in a while. Here's the thing, though. Live dribble creation is the most important thing in the NBA. You can figure out how to put the ball in guys' hands, but being able to toss a guy the ball and for him to go give you a bucket is more important than anything. And because the Raptors don't have that, what they have is extremely high efficient location data for their shots. They take shots in all the best areas. They're really good on spot ups. They figured out how they can develop catch and shoot threes. They do all this kind of stuff. And yet their offense is rote. Their offense is not nearly as dynamic as it should be. And they can get walled off for long periods of time. If you don't have live dribble creation, that's what it is. And this fetishization of true shooting percentage or effective field goal percentage, to me, is becoming more and more removed from where the NBA actually is. Like, of course, it's lovely to have a guy like Derek White and have him just be hyper efficient and give you so much on the defensive end, right? Like, that's great. And the fact that he shoots the lick out of the basketball now is great. And he's efficient. That's like perfect. But there are a lot of role players who I think have like a more peeled back version of that, who don't do quite as much in every area, but the true shooting percentage might be close. You need guys who do hard things. You need guys who don't just make the shots that are easy. And the Raptors are such a great inflection point for this point from B-Ball Archives in this question, because the Raptors are a team that have to kind of spoon feed a lot of shot charts, a lot of shot diets to guys. These guys are not super dynamic in where they can get their shots from when their shot chart is different, or when they're asked to be a little bit more dynamic and get into a pull-up. The Raptors have guys who immediately fail as soon as they're removed from that point, like removed from their comfortable spot, the easier shots that they can hit. Immediately the Raptors offense derails. And offense, it's about creating easy shots. Yes, you want to be able to create those, but it's about being able to have filler, be able to carry the torch in between, run stoppers, guys like that. And the run stoppers are the guys who keep, and maybe it's like 58% true shooting. Maybe it's 59. Maybe it's 57. But obsessing over a guy with an easier shot chart at like 61% on less usage, easier shot diet, versus a guy who's at like 57%, but he's doing a lot of stuff. There's a lot of creation. A lot of people don't make those comparisons. There's not that much contextual analysis for like, okay, these guys are doing the hard things. These are the hard types of possessions. These are the players who are much better with this guy on the floor constantly. Kyle Lowry did this a lot. Kyle Lowry's shot chart was always pretty difficult. He got deep in the paint. He got to a lot of difficult spots on the floor. He hit pull-up threes. He was able to make a bunch of the right decisions. And everyone said, there's just better players out there. And for a lot of guards, they just weren't. And it was because we weren't properly contextualizing what he does. And a lot of that is on the defensive end too. But the long and short of that point specifically is that we should spend a lot more time considering like the context of how players are succeeding. It's one of the best things that we can do, or at least fans, do whatever you want. My job as an analyst is to, as Joseph Cassidy says, give us the context, baby. That's right. That's my job, is to try and make these things a little bit more well-known. Davion Mitchell, is he one of the best players on this team? No. Why does he have one of the best current impacts on this team? Because he's completely essential to the defense, and the defense is built in such a way that his importance is heightened. It doesn't mean he's a better player, but it means on this team he plays, a more important role for now anyway. We have a conversation about that later on. It's just The Raptors, they make things really easy for their limited players, but there's too many limited players on this roster. And so I wanted to take a look at, to answer that question, there should be that kind of stuff. And the Raptors are kind of governed by, limited players. And I did this. I just wrote this piece about how the Raptors kind of set Scottie up to score and how they beat zone. And I break down why plays work and kind of how they go about setting up the framework of their plays so that they're advantageous. You can read that at raptorsrepublic.com. But the Raptors are a team that has to spoon feed. So, yes, they are third last in the NBA in pull-up efficiency overall. They are dead last in three-point pull-up. They are dead last in three-point pull-up volume and efficiency. They are 14th in efficiency on two-point pull-ups, and that is mostly on Gradey and Scottie, who we'll get into some of the numbers because I do want to look at on this team, is there potential for a shooter? Because we know, and the NBA knows, that you can teach a guy to hit, catch, and shoot threes. We know that. But can you develop pull-up efficiency? Norm Powell is a really good example of a guy who, over the course of his career, became a demon pulling up. But pulling up is by far the hardest one to do because your gather is more dynamic. You don't get to fix your feet. You have to be able to play against certain levels of drop. You have to be, maybe there's a defender chasing you. You don't always get to find your exact space and do it exactly the way you want. You have to be adaptable and you have to be precise. There's a team like, I'm pretty sure the Raptors shoot 27% on their pull-up threes. I think the Wolves right now are at 39% and the Cavs are at like 38%. These are really talented shooters. These are guys like Anthony Edwards. These are guys like Darius Garland, Donovan Mitchell, and Darius and Donovan is probably one of the better pull-up three-point shooting backcourts of all time. I mean, there's Clay and Steph, of course, but I guess like maybe you go Dame and CJ, but Darius and Donovan is up there. And yeah, Brad Farndon says, I believe in Jacoby pull-up with reps and a 1 or 2 summers. Yeah, so Jacoby will come along as a thought. So I was looking at Jacoby's stats, and we'll get over the Raptors roster as a whole. We'll get to Scottie and Gradey most importantly. But Jacoby this season is 0 for 7 on his pull-up threes. He's made 9 pull-up mid-range jumpers, and he's shooting those at 41%. I've liked the pull-up mid-range jumpers a lot. 0 for 7 from 3, not great. There's nothing. You watch the film, it looks like it will come around. He has great mechanics. In college at Baylor, Jacoby hit 9 pull-up threes. And keep in mind, and when we get to Gradey, this will really matter, but it's a shorter three-point line. He hit 9 pull-up threes for 25%, still pretty bad. And he hit 16 middies for 33%. So Jacoby, there is no statistical marker, 0, that suggests that he'll be a good pull-up shooter. That doesn't mean he won't be, though, right? Like, for example, Pascal being a good pull-up mid-range shooter, some people thought he couldn't shoot coming out of the draft, and obviously he didn't shoot threes. He was, for a year, one of the worst three-point shooters on high volume ever. But Pascal, right before he left New Mexico, was that year one of the highest volume mid-range shooters in all of college basketball. He actually had a lot of reps as a pull-up jump shooter. It just wasn't localized to be on the three-point line. Jacoby, these are his college reps. There's not a lot there. I haven't seen, I would say, the high school stuff. Maybe I'll talk to Josh about that a little bit. But Jacoby, you're leaning mostly on the film. So I've seen Jacoby at practice. I've seen Jacoby in games. I see him before games. I'm lucky to get to see that kind of stuff. And it makes sense to me that his mechanics should translate into being a good pull-up shooter. I think we're seeing a little bit of that in the mid-range so far. He can do it leaning both ways. He's obviously more comfortable going left. Most right-handed shooters are, because you get to stabilize on your left hip. You get to align on the right side, right? Keep everything clean. And then also going right is harder because you have to stabilize on the same side as your shooting arm. Them's the breaks. But Jacoby, I think, has the potential to do it. You can't say anything's a certainty as far as you can't say anything is a certainty in the NBA because it's so hard to bring, there's a lot of players who've succeeded in the G League who have scored like 33 points per game in the G League, and just the spaces and time that you get for pull up, it doesn't allow in the NBA the same way. It's just bigger players, faster players, like all that kind of stuff. But G League wise, Jacoby has been doing a better job. I see people addressing that in chat. Yeah, he's hit a couple pull up threes, but as far as like the stats we have, there's nothing that says he's going to be great in the future. You just have to believe in the mechanics. And as far as Jacoby goes, the mechanics to me, they look good. He has pretty good transfer out of it. He's very clean up top. It's a very simple motion, and it's a one motion pull up, so it will look like a little bit different. How he sets his feet will be really, really important for how he does that going forward. It's work that comes in the off season. The Jacoby stuff, though, we don't have that much volume to even look at, but nothing says it will happen outside of the film. And the film, to me, and just watching him in person, practice before games, in games, whatever, looks pretty good. I believe in Jacoby's pull up going forward. Gradey, we have a lot more volume because Gradey gets shots up, and Gradey was a lot more voluminous at the NBA level. Like Gradey coming out of Kansas was considered one of the best shooting prospects in some time. And the reason for that is in college, Gradey hit 23 pull-up threes across the college season on 53%. Now, it's important to address, like, hey, 53% is pretty nuts, but it's a shorter court. It's a shorter three-point line. And on his 18 middies that he hit as a college player, he shot 39%. It's pretty absurd. Last season, Gradey shot 10 pull-up threes. He hit 10 pull-up threes. He shot 25% on them. You can do the math there, 10 for 40. He hit 19 mid-range jumpers, pull-ups last year. He shot 39% on them. This year, Gradey has hit 15 pull-up threes because he's shooting a lot of them. He's shooting 24%. Not good. However, he's hit 29 mid-range jumpers, pull-ups, and he's shooting 50% on those. It's something we've been tracking. It's something we've seen. He's obviously been very, very efficient from there. There's a lot of stats coming at you. My apologies, but this is the fastest way to get all of this across. Knowing Gradey's stats, which is, as an NBA player, roughly on 25 makes. And keep in mind, like, the 3-point stabilization mark for most people or stat people is considered 750. So after 750 attempts, people consider like, okay, that percentage is mostly what it's going to stabilize at. That's the sample size that we need. Gradey has hit 25 and he's shooting 25% on those. It's, it is what it is. Raptors report says above the break threes have been poor for him his whole career this year. Well, his whole career, yes. So like a year and a half. Poor, not poor, because above the break threes are harder. And it kind of is what we talked about, right? And with Gradey, like, and you say Gradey can't hit above the break threes, but all the above the break threes, he shot 37% at the college level on NBA threes, which is all above the break threes. So he had a decent amount of volume in college. And also the Gradey can't hit threes thing is that you have to address also what we talked about at the very start is like contextual analysis of why certain players have hard shot diets and why their true shooting percentage or how they shoot on the floor is not really like desirable or whatever. Gradey, as far as like spot up above the break threes, is actually not that bad. He can hit spot up above the break threes. He shoots 43% on his spot ups. But what Gradey does is he has a lot of pull up above the break threes. That's a huge part of his shot diet. He has a lot of sprinting off of pin down above the break threes. When he gets time to set his feet into it and isn't used as like this guy that the Raptors ping around the court and have sprint into jumpers, Gradey is not that bad. So Gradey can hit above the break threes, and I think he will in the future. Although contextually, he takes some of the hardest threes in the NBA. This is recognized by Raptors report says he hits 43% on spot ups because corner threes are spot up. Any three on the court can be a spot up. Anyway, so some of these stats, like you actually have to go like watch all the shots to see what's happening. But Gradey has one of the hardest shot diets for threes as far as like in the NBA. That's what he's being treated as. That's what the Raptors want to use him as. And we're seeing a dip in efficiency as a result. As far as like when the shots are easy, he shoots better. However, I'm still disappointed with Gradey's three-point shooting overall. Not to get stuck on Gradey too much, but just to address the contextual stuff that we talked about at the front end of the podcast. It's important to think about this kind of stuff. Gradey, I wish, was shooting better from three. Even though he's shooting like 42, 43% on his spot up threes, you still want that to improve to maybe like 47, 48%. And Gradey also, when I watched all of his three-point shots last year, and he was shooting such a high percentage on his movement triples, that hasn't carried over the same way this year. It's been a little bit disappointing that when Gradey, who like sometimes you think it's going to be a dependable shot, it doesn't come out in the wash that way. You see him go like 1 for 5 or 2 for 6. And as one of the best shooting prospects to come out of the draft in the past like 5 years, you don't want to be seeing 35%. Even if he has a tough shot diet, you want to be seeing, okay, tough shot diet, maybe it's 37, 38%, because that's what a lot of great shooters do. But that's what S and I talked about on the last podcast where S did the query where it was like, well, how many players have shot 35% over their first 2 seasons and still ended up really good 3-point shooters? And the list of great shooters, there was like a lot. Guys like Lauri Markkanen, guys like Darius Garland, for example. There's a whole bunch of them. But yeah, Gradey, to Raptors Report point, I think is underperforming his expected 3-point shooting talent. Now, there are reasons for why that's happening, but yeah. However, all that said, I gave all of the numbers. Gradey, I do think, will be a viable pull-up threat in the future. Now, similar to Jacoby, like there's nothing at the NBA level that suggests that Gradey will be. You just have to rely on what's happening with the jumper, the mechanics. You have to believe in that. And not similar to Jacoby, Gradey has a pretty great percentage, 53%, and a lot of volume at the college level, hitting 23 threes. It's a shorter season. He's almost 1 a game, right? Pull-up threes. And there's not a lot of pull-up threes in the corner, as most people know. A lot of above the break threes at the college level, a lot of NBA distance threes at the college level, and a lot of pull-ups. If you believe in Gradey's shooting, you either do or you don't. There's obviously great indicators right now for his spot-up shooting, of course. But we want more from Gradey. We want movement shooting. We want dead eye, above the break 3-point shooting. And he's underperformed some of that. However, all that said, I still think Gradey is a guy who will be able, in my mind, to be able to provide 3-point shooting at the pull-up level or pull-up shooting at the 3-point level. Scottie Barnes is the next one. Scottie's hit 14 threes, pull-up threes this season. 24% he's shooting on them. He has shot 56. He's made 56 mid-range jumpers, pull-up jumpers this season. That's massive volume. Very big. He's one of the most voluminous pull-up mid-range jumpers in the NBA. He's shooting 49%. Now, the best of the best pull-up mid-range jumper guys are typically between that 55 to 60% range. That's where guys like Devin Booker and Kevin Durant and like Steph and Seth will have years there. But Scottie bringing 56 makes in 30 games, 49%, pretty great. Like that's a great number for him to work from. Last year, he hit 42 over the course of his season, mid-range pull-ups at 40%. We're building something out here. We're seeing, I think, a pretty good repertoire. And this is something when I wrote that huge piece in his rookie season, when I was like, this guy's going to be a superstar, you could watch him finish around the rim and his hook shot proficiency and all that kind of stuff. It made sense to me that he would be able to take this step as a shooter, especially in the mid-range, because his touch is quite strong. His ability to like float the ball in, that it wasn't a game winner that he hit against the Atlanta Hawks, but that like screen reject, jab, throw ahead dribble into the push floater, that shot he made, you have to have pretty great touch to like locate that. Like Pascal is a guy who has had great touch. It's the, Draymond stuck in to try and get that steal, and he made the swim move. He hit the championship winning shot in 2019, just floated it in. You need good touch to make floaters. And Scottie is in the midst of taking that floater touch, that hook shot touch, and translating it into the mid-range jumper. And he's very controlled. His footwork isn't that expansive, but he's very controlled and he's very on balance in the mid-range. And he's huge. God, this guy's huge. So I think Scottie is figuring out, the efficiency of that play is not massive or anything like that. Like, it's still a mid-range jumper at the end of the day. But Scottie, I think, is figuring out an aspect of his game that will be kind of impervious to defensive game plans going forward. Like, he'll be able to provide so much value as a shot maker in isolation. Like, he's really building out that aspect of his game. Of course, 24% on pull-ups this year. Pull-up threes this year is not good. 19% on pull-up threes last year. He hardly hit any, only 11. He's hit already 3 more this season. It's tougher to see that becoming a part of Scottie's game because it's just like he's so good with his touch on hook shots, on floaters, on those mid-range jumpers, because it just gets to stay up in his shoulders and he just gets to keep his arm up and he just gets to go up with it. Whereas, when you're going from three, you have to incorporate the legs so much more. And Scottie, the legs aren't really part of his mid-range jumper. It's not really part of his free throw. It's not that much like part of his hook shot. He has to figure out like his kinetic chain to get the ball to go in the basket. And like, truthfully, he's really struggled. We talked about it earlier, like 750 attempts being the marker for like stabilized 3-point percentage. If that were true for Scottie, which I don't think it is, I think that would mean he's like a 31% 3-point shooter, or expected to be over the course of time, which I don't think is true. I think he will be better than that. But Scottie, there's nothing statistically that suggests he will be a 3-point shooter, or a good pull-up 3-point shooter. But I wouldn't be surprised if instead of hanging around like 22, 23%, Scottie is a guy who maybe creeps up towards 29, 30%. And 29, 30% is, that's 29, 30% is not great, but you can kind of survive off of it. 33% or around there on pull-up threes is kind of the place where teams start treating it like something they want to avoid. If you're like 30%, 29% below, that's kind of tough, right? You know what I mean? Raptors report says Gradey shooting 32% on 347 above the break threes, despite some of that being catch and shoot for his career. Yeah, dude, but we've already addressed this. Like, there's contextual stuff, and like we're already saying we want Gradey to be a better shooter. He hasn't done it, but like, we've talked about this, right? Kingsley C says, can we ever talk about the draft? How our squad should look if we draft Cooper, Harper, or Ace or Yak? If this is an interesting topic, would we need to trade RJ? I'm getting into draft stuff as far as doing deep dives. I don't know enough about the draft at this point. I know like some people feel, I guess, comfortable just like looking at a stat line and seeing like 4 highlights and being like, this guy looks sick. There's a reason Trey and we do a lot of draft stuff. I got to start watching. Usually I start in March. I'll start in February. There'll be like, there will be draft stuff from myself as early as the back end of February. I promise. That's never happened before, but this year we'll be doing that. So that's when we'll talk about that kind of stuff. But yeah, Scottie, pull-up 3-point shooting, I think it will be passable, but not a huge part of his game. Now, IQ is the big, easy one. That's the guy. Like, IQ doesn't have to learn how to shoot. IQ doesn't have to feel any type of way. And like, again, sorry, Raptors report, like, I don't want to come off harsh, but this is like the second week in a row where you've been like very like, what the hell is wrong with Gradey's shooting? And like, truthfully, like, again, it's not as good as it should be in my mind, but I can only add so much context. And like, I guess, S looked up the query you wanted. I'm trying to provide context now. Like, it's easy to just go on cleaning the glass and look at his above the break 3-point shooting percentage, but also he has like a high volume of like off screen threes and like running off screen threes. He has a high volume of extended threes. He has a high volume of like difficult 3-point shots. And yeah, Gradey's underperforming his 3-point talent, I think, but I don't know how much to talk about it past that, outside of like, unless you want me to say like, no, Gradey is not good. He won't be a good 3-point shooter, but I don't believe that. Now, of course you can believe that, but as far as like discussing the Gradey thing, we spent like, I don't know, like a lot of time discussing the Gradey thing and like adding the context of it. But to Al Sam's or AI Sam's point, honestly, quote, I don't think there's any reason for concern with Gradey shooting. He's second year. He has flashes. He makes free throws. He'll be fine. End quote. Yeah, there's an interesting thing with free throws as well. Like, people used to think free throws were an ironclad way of proving somebody was going to be able to shoot threes. Like, that used to be something where people would look at free throw percentage and be like, okay, he can start stepping back. But that's less common now, just because I think that there's a lot of dynamism in above the break 3-point shooting. And obviously we talked about that with the Raptors overall, that's Scottie, that's Gradey, that's Jacoby. IQ, well, I'll just say quickly, like, Jamison Battle is 50% on his pull-up threes, but he's made 7 this year. We talked about Ochai. It's been really bad, 22%. RJ has made 4 this year, but 18%, and he's not good on middies either. Boucher has hit 3. He's shooting 33%. He's hit 6 pull-up mid-range jumpers at 46%. It's just like basically the Raptors aren't a team that shoots pull-up threes. As we talked about at the start, they're have the lowest frequency of pull-up threes in the NBA, and they shoot the worst percentage, 27% as a team. Alsam says Ochai is inflated. He's wide open all the time. Yep. Ochai has a really easy shot chart. He makes all of his layups in transition or off of cuts, and he shoots a lot of wide open threes. Them's the breaks. IQ, though, as a shooter, this year, he's hit 12 pull-up threes. He's played 9 games, so that's pretty good. He's hitting 37% on them. Great. 37% is definitely good enough for pull-up threes because, again, most pull-up threes are above the break. You don't pull up into the corner very often unless it's like, dead corner, grenade DHO. It's just not that common. Usually, guys, that is what it is. But as far as like IQ last season, he hit 54 pull-up threes and shot 37% on those. It's pretty good. Like IQ's pull-up 3 is not something anybody should ever be worrying about. What is interesting, though, is that this year he's hit 4 mid-range jumpers for 40%. 4 over 9 games is hardly anything. Last year, he hit 15 mid-range jumpers, but he shot 27% on them as a Raptor. And on top of that, like his floater didn't really materialize the same way as, I guess, it didn't materialize in Toronto the same way it was materializing in New York, because Lewis had that great piece when IQ came over where he was like, this guy is, I think he was shooting 59% on floaters at that point in time, and that wasn't present as a Raptor. And floater touch is a good indicator of shooting touch, but guards, you don't want them shooting too many floaters because obviously you want them getting to the rim. You want them getting deep paint touches, affecting change in the defense. And so we're 30 minutes into this. And I'll tell you, can the Raptors learn to shoot? I think that the Raptors who can learn to shoot, I think that the Raptors have learned to shoot in some capacity. They're not bad on spot ups. They're not bad on catch and shoot threes. And that is in the NBA a very teachable skill. However, as far as pull-up shooting goes, I think they mostly have to draft guys who have the potential for that. They have to trade for guys who mostly have the potential for that. They have to sign guys who have the potential for that, or all three of those things: sign, trade, draft guys who already have that in their toolkit. Sometimes it comes out of nowhere. Donovan Mitchell came out of college. It wasn't a huge part of his game. And then immediately with Utah, he just started banging pull-up triples. Sometimes those developments come along. But as far as taking a guy who that's just not present in his game and adding pull-up dynamism, it's really, really rare. This has to be something, I think, for this Raptors team, which is quite literally the worst in the NBA at it. This needs to be something that they're mindful of going into the future, that they have to add more of. That's why they were probably so excited for IQ to come over. Now, IQ has warts on his playmaking, his driving game, and has been much worse defensively than most people thought, but he hits pull-up threes, and he's efficient at it, and he's good at it. That's great stuff. We have to see. The 3 guys we talked about, Jacoby, I believe that it will be a part of his game going forward. Gradey, I believe it will be a part of his game going forward. Scottie, the pull-up 3, I'm not sold. Not like a huge part of his game, but I think the 3-point shot overall will be something that Scottie's able to provide. IQ, yes. RJ, I don't believe it. He's got really, really truncated mechanics. It's really clunky in there. There's a reason why he's pretty passable as a catch and shoot guy, because he can shot prep and get it into his pocket. He can kind of tuck his elbow the way he likes, but there's a reason why he's never been good shooting the mid-range jumper. His runner is pretty good. Getting to the floater is good because, RJ can get deep. But as far as like a pull-up 3-point shot, I don't think I'll ever believe in that from RJ, which maybe is too harsh, but I think that's kind of where I sit at the RJ stuff. And, we have GPWW says, I think this season's biggest failure is IQ not being on the court. Joseph Cassidy saying, just get well, IQ. Yeah, I guess like Immanuel Quickley being healthy is a really interesting thing and allows us to transition into a really, really interesting conversation because Davion and other guards, as far as like impact, have been able to provide, stuff to the Raptors. And we talked about at the front, like why there is an oversized impact from Davion because of his defense. And this is from at NicksWolves04, quote, with Davion providing a blueprint for what this Raps team could look like when they're good on defense again, with a point of attack guy, Scottie, and Yak as the spine of the defense, do we think the priority should shift towards acquiring a defensive guard with more offensive chops over a more dynamic offensive player? So I think that yes. And I said this when they traded for IQ, that I didn't believe in the defense the same way because I was like a little skeptical of it. And I think on-ball defense is mostly a little bit of a prank. Like when people talk about like, oh, this guard is a really good on-ball defender, usually I'm like, why aren't we talking about his on-ball defense? Like, why have we automatically and already moved into like, oh, he's slick off-ball? Usually to me that means the on-ball stuff is not that great. And while IQ has the wingspan, the frame, the athleticism that he should be able to, in time succeed as an on-ball defender, on-ball guards aren't usually at their most effective like 26 years and up. On-ball guards are usually at their most effective like pretty quick coming out of the draft and for the first like 4 or 5 years of their career, because they have that spark, they have that oomph. I don't believe in IQ's on-ball defense coming around. Like, I just don't believe it. And the off-ball defense, totally. Off-ball defense, I think players get better at over time until, their body breaks down a little bit. But like Jalen Suggs, Dyson Daniels, like think of all the best on-ball defenders, especially since we moved past the era where they give all defense spots to players because they're like, oh, you have a big name. Like Kobe made 9 of them, right? First team, which is crazy. But now like it's the younger guys who are demons on ball and who are like super, super have like a lot of oomph to their game. That has never been like Davion is another one. Like Davion is only in what, year 4 or 5. And I don't expect Davion at like age 29 to be better than he is now. Like on-ball defense does not get better over time. I don't, at least in my anecdotal mind. And so I wouldn't be expecting that from Immanuel Quickley. And guys can maintain it for some time, but I don't think you're ever going to be better, at on-ball defense than you are at like 24, 25. It's just the young guys bring such a oomph to it. And yeah, I don't believe in that for IQ. And I really do think, and this is also, again, this was what we talked about last episode, was because there was the RR commenters, I think Prime Bargnani, More Milk, I think were the 2 commenters who were saying like Samson is low on IQ. Correct. I'm low on IQ's defense. I'm low on his playmaking to some degree. Like cards on the table. Everyone's biased. It's just about like being open about like where you lean and what your preconceptions are. So yes, I think that when this Raptors team is very good in the future, hopefully built around Scottie Barnes, I think that they will have a different lead guard. Now, IQ, it could be he's 29 and he's making 32 and a half and he's a 6 man or a 2 guard sometimes or whatever the hell. But I think it has to be a different lead guard because they do need that. I agree with Nick's Wolves here. Like Davion provides a blueprint of what works because again, Davion is averaging 7 points and 5 assists. He doesn't shoot the ball. Davion is not an elite NBA player. He's not an above average NBA player. He's just like a really strong point of attack defender who helps the Raptors enact their scheme. And then offensively, like he touches the ball and then gets away from it. And it's just like, hey guys, survive on this end and I'll help on the other end. And the Raptors are 4-1 in their last 5. They've played some weaker teams, but it is largely like more punch defensively. I think they're 7th or 8th in defensive rating over that time. It's because their defense is much better. And Davion provides way more punch than anybody else on the roster can. Offensively, obviously, that's not true. But you need to be able to defend. And the Raptors are not a roster built for defense right now. It is what it is. It's tough to make it work when there's like Davion helps cover up for a lot of the limitations that Gradey has, that RJ has. IQ, probably if Gradey and RJ were replaced with better players, IQ could hang in a little bit better. But I think having a strong defender at the point of attack is one of the most important things. The interesting thing though is what we just talked about, where like Immanuel Quickley is he's a tremendous pull-up three-point shooter. However, his volume is way too low for how talented he is, and it's because he has a slow load and because he has a low pickup point, and he's not able to like ratchet up his threes whenever he wants because like Donovan Mitchell is a guy who's a throw ahead dribble, stop on a dime, load from the shoulder, launch over top of somebody. But IQ has very little lift on his jumper. He has a low release point. He has a slow load. And so he can't just like ratchet up his 3-point shooting randomly. So there's like, he can't get that massive volume or hasn't been able to yet. I'd love to see that going forward because he is such a talented shooter and he's not provided that defense. So it makes me think like, yeah, I think the Raptors' priority should be, really should be, a guard who's able to kind of get after it on defense. And Davion is not the future. Like, there's a reason in this comment that, T says point of attack guy instead of Davion. Like, Davion's a blueprint. He's a facsimile of what the Raptors need defensively. Even if the guy isn't as good as Davion, because Davion is one of the best point of attack defenders in the NBA, you need to have an amalgam of those skills to some degree. Yeah, that is what it is. Al Sem says, are they playing his own? Like, everyone has to play individual defense. That's why I don't buy into the MIG on the ball stuff. That's just individual defense, guarding your man up, everything behind you. The help, the rotations, boxing out, all that is team and scheme. Yeah, but team and scheme are very, very connected at like who's on ball, right? Because if you get every offense wants to put a defense in rotation. And that's why switch schemes are so popular, is because you can keep yourself out of rotation just by kicking guys out and keeping them above the break and maintaining your shell. And the Raptors, I mean, they've struggled against teams like that in the past because they don't have pull-up shooting. And getting kicked out repeatedly means like, damn, how do we make this work? And the team defense, like playing this aggressive style is not that bad because actually a lot of the best teams in the NBA, especially in the playoffs, will start sending a guy into the backcourt to pressure the ball, and higher pickup points become a really important part of playoff style defense. You need to be able to apply pressure to move teams into parts on the court so that they don't just get to walk into the framework of their offense that they want. And Davion is really good at that. However, Davion is really not good at offense. And Davion's place with this team, I mean, I don't even know how long he's here for, right? But I think they might be like 7-12 when Davion starts. And some of those starts come without, maybe it was 7-12 when Davion and Scottie start. I don't remember the number exactly. But anyway, yes, I think that the Raptors have to be able to draft a guard who is able to pull up from three and defend the point of attack. They probably thought that's what they were getting with IQ. That hasn't been the case. C. Wong says true two-way player is hard to get, though. That's 100% correct. It's tough to get really good players. You have to believe in your development process. You have to believe in your draft process. You have to be able to pick guys out from other teams, whether it's, a cheap deal in free agency or whether it's, a trade where there's, a relatively unknown player who's ready to pop off. Like Dyson Daniels, GPWW says Dyson Daniels archetype at the 2 would be perfect. Dyson Daniels was just a throw-in, really. Like DeJounte didn't have that much value at that point in time, but Dyson plus first, 2 of them, I think. Like Dyson, nobody expected him to pop the hell off, but with the Hawks, he's popping the hell off. And also it's contextual, right? Because Dyson Daniels is a very limited offensive player, but they get to put him on that team because Trae Young is such a massive creator that they don't really need creation from the 2. Scottie is not a massive creator on offense. He doesn't just come in and create easy looks for his teammates. He needs the Raptors to be very specific in how they set up offense. He needs the ball in certain spots, and he needs and he's, to this point in his career, has not created efficient offense en masse for anybody, not even himself, so far in his career. Of course, he can get there. That's what everybody hopes for, but that hasn't happened yet. So you need a guy like RJ Barrett, who's a bad defender, to give you a whole bunch of big points in pick and roll, for example. Like RJ is still 83rd percentile in the NBA in pick and roll. He's still a great pick and roll option. They need that. They need a guy like Gradey to come in with 55% true shooting and take all the most difficult shots in the world and provide spacing, because they don't have a guy to just hand the ball to. They have to be very specific in how they create. They need more high-low reads and more dynamic passing from their big in Jakob Poeltl, so his turnover percentage skyrockets. Like, all this kind of stuff is because of their offensive limitations. And when you have less offensive limitations, then you can trade in some of the more talented offensive players for perhaps a stronger defensive player. The Raptors in the future, they will make that pivot. I'm like almost certain of it. I don't know who they will pivot away from. I don't know what that's going to be, but that pivot is an absolute, in my mind, necessity. Now, here's the thing. You guys, you've left middle school, and so have I. So has Axe. Axe draws on 40 years of body spray research. That's 40. And the expertise of the world's leading perfumers to craft quality fragrances and bring continual innovation aimed to help young guys feel content and confident in their own skin. You can find the Axe Toronto Raptors 30th anniversary limited edition collection available for a limited time only at all major retailers. That's Walmart, Shoppers Drug Mart, and the Real Canadian Superstore. They got the body spray. We're going to give it a little spray. There we go. We got the deodorant, okay? And we got body wash. And all this smells nice in here now. And this is sea mist and grapefruit. Go get it. Available at all the major retailers. Walmart, Shoppers Drug Mart, and the Real Canadian Superstore. Get it now before it's too late. Brad Farndon says, we love Axe. We love Axe. Blinky Bill Blake says, what's it smell like? It smells like sea mist and grapefruit tinge on top. It smells kind of like Axe, like the Axe I just remember growing up. Kellen Nasmir says, I love Axe and all of their products. I have to pick up the special Raptors branded Axe products. Yes, we love that. We'll get back into some of the more questions or some more of the questions. So 2 really big topics so far that are define the Raptors going forward. Their pull-up shooting and their point of attack defense. Now, what is the best option going forward? And the one I expressed pessimism about and don't really believe in. But if IQ becomes a demon at the point of attack and is just a guy who like lets it fly all the time from downtown, then those questions are answered and they get to look elsewhere. They haven't been answered so far. He hasn't even been healthy. It's been unfortunate. Like I don't feel bad about the thing. Like I'm lower on IQ, but I was lower on him last year. This isn't because he's not playing, but if he gets to play, he can prove me wrong. He can make me look like a jackass, even though I'm not saying anything mean, but you get my meaning. From Esfandiar Berheni, he says, if you were stuck in Alaska for 2 days in the wilderness, explain your process to surviving. Well, Luke from the Outdoor Boys here. Apparently, you want to find a tree root, a big old root ball. You want to dig out a bunch of snow. You want to cut a bunch of wood. You want to throw it in the root ball because the root ball is going to burn. It's going to act as like a blocker for the wind. I'm presuming, I'm in Alaska. Okay. This is a crib sheet of Outdoor Boys videos that I've watched, but that he said that's the best way, and just burn as much fire as you want. Because if I'm stuck in Alaska for 2 days, you're not going to sleep that much. And I'm only stuck for 2 days, so I don't need to eat. So I'm boiling snow for water, and I'm just making fire. That's what you need to accomplish. Now, finding food, probably not going to happen, right? Like, what am I going to go hunting? I don't think so. I'm not going to be able to make it. However, that's how I'm going to survive. I'm going to drink water. I'm going to burn. I'm going to have fire. That's how you survive. That's what I've learned. I've done camping in my life, but never in Alaska, and not like rugged camping either. You know what I mean? Like I did carpentry. That's where I come from. But as far as like survival stuff, nah. And frame a house. Put the siding on the house, put the shingles on the house, do all that kind of stuff. However, we don't have the power tools or the hammer north of the Northwest Territories border or whatever. Goose says, do you think Gradey experiments too much with his finishing, or is it one of those let a young player find his limits thing? So this is a good question because Gradey displays elite touch and he looks really impressive sometimes. I mean, last game he was 5 for 5 inside the arc. He had 2 dunks, I believe. He's got 4 dunks in 2 games. It was like 33% of his dunks this year have come in a 2-game span. His legs look like they got a little bit more juice in them lately, but some of his finishes require like elite touch, and they look like floaters, like the sky high floaters over the top of Rudy Gobert, making the finger rolls, like the George Gervin finger rolls, the hook shots, bank shots. Like he's got a lot of moves in his toolkit. However, he's left a lot of easy stuff on the rim. And I know there was that it got aggregated like crazy. There was that infographic that highlighted Gradey as the worst finisher in the NBA based on location data, because Gradey, he was taking however many layups and he just wasn't making enough of them. Even right now, like Gradey's at rim percentage per cleaning the glass is at 53%, 12th percentile for a wing. That's not last, but considering his volume there, it's just not good enough. And he shot 60% last year. But this year, he's taking hard shots at the rim. And while they're at the rim, one, he takes a lot of, as Brad Farndon here says, Gradey is audacious trying to attack some of these bigs. He takes absurd shots at the rim. Like they look insane. One, which is lowering his percentage. But then two, he's also just missing easy shots. Now, if you're a Gradey believer like myself, what you hope is that those easy shots start going in. Those layups start going in, and that he creates a baseline of like, I make this percentage of layups, and then it goes up as far as like, the percentage he makes on tough takes. Kyrie is obviously, like, Gradey will never be that level of finisher, but Kyrie is a really fun example, because Kyrie, I think, is generally considered like maybe the greatest finisher of all time. And he's only had 2 years in his whole career where he was above the 90th percentile finishing at the rim in regards to point guards and combo guards. Only 2. And he's had 1 season shooting above 70%. Shooting above 70% is like, that is golden. He was 97th percentile in his half year with Dallas, the 20 games. Shot 74% at the rim, 51% short mid-range. Kyrie is a wizard. However, when you are audacious, when you are a ridiculous finisher who can rely on touch for crazy scoop shots and crazy wraparound, layups that Gradey is able to do sometimes, you ask more of yourself than most men will ever ask as a finisher. And what Gradey does is he repeatedly, and I mean repeatedly, tanks his numbers because he is just throwing stuff at the rim and being like, this leaves my hand. It's imbued with my talent. It will find its way into the rim. And at 53%, we're finding out that is maybe not the case, and certainly not as good as Kyrie. But it's a good, it's a good point to make, right? So Gradey, again, Scottie right now is taking like a million pull-up jumpers. And his points per possession, again, he hasn't been able to provide as an initiator high points per possession in any play this year per synergy. Just as an isolator, nope. As a pick and roll ball handler, nope. As a post-up option, nope. Average or below as far as points per possession. But Scottie's doing really hard things, and you hope that in the future this is important. And you expect, like, when he's doing things more so in his comfortable range, that he'll be able to, do the hard things but also succeed at the easy things. We'll see. I mean, like, Scottie doesn't have a huge laundry list of great, initiation. But last year, when I looked at all of his, his pick and roll ball handling, he was 80th percentile. He had a great year last year. Of course, some of that was being able to play with guys like Pascal and OG for most of his games. But this year, he has to do more. He has to lift more. And Gradey is in a similar thing where this Raptors team is so limited. And Gradey, when I did that piece on how he was considered, despite the fact that he's not finishing well at the rim, per like points per possession and considering for volume and like assist percentage on that kind of stuff, Gradey had a claim to being the best driver from his draft class in year 2. Now, I haven't done the analysis, like a month later, but early on he was doing that. And it's because Gradey draws so many fouls and Gradey shoots such a high percentage from the free throw line that his points per possession skyrockets. And also because he's comfortable taking the ball on a drive, hitting a pull-up jumper. Even though he's not efficient at the rim, a shot at the rim, like 53%, hey, good possession overall. 53% at the rim, hey, maybe that can be better going forward, right? That kind of stuff. I think Gradey, as long as he figures out, like, hey, it figures out where he's supposed to be. Like, this year is a learning experience. It's year 2, and he's on one of the 5 worst teams in the NBA. He takes way more shots per game. He's probably taking, like, close to the amount of shots per game now than he will in, like, year 4 or year 5, you know? Like, he just gets a lot of shots. The Raptors rely on him for a lot of their offense, whether it's, like, with his motion or with his ability to shoot the ball, as limited as he can be in some regards, especially off the bounce. But Gradey, he does experiment too much as far as, like, just he experiments too much in that, like, it's not that successful. But in regards to development, I mean, what the hell? Why not? Scottie is, I mean, Scottie is a guy who Scottie is trying things. Like, Scottie, he's shooting a lot of threes, and he's shooting 27%. Still getting them up. Why? Because look at the team. What else are you going to do? You know? What else are you going to do? That's what you're supposed to be doing. The Raptors are not playing the most efficient version of themselves. Maybe they have been lately with the vets and the fact that they're 4-1 in their last 5, and they want their vets to play more, and they want to play more organized, better basketball. Guys like Chris Boucher and Bruce Brown are popping the hell off. Kelly Olynyk's been scoring. I mean, yes, it's just like you got to let guys experiment. And Gradey clearly has the capacity to make very difficult shots at the rim. What's more important to me, rather than like the experimentation and doing the hard things, is like Gradey sometimes is doing easy things and just missing those. That to me is the bigger problem. Sometimes Gradey leaves easy stuff on the rim. And when you watch it, it doesn't look like he's overextended. It's just like, damn, you just missed an easy shot. And the hope, obviously, is that Gradey is not just like that comes around, because some guys have the yips or whatever the hell, and it can stay for a little while. Like Pascal has been like a 43% shooter over a pretty big sample size since he had that 9 for 54 stretch or something as a Raptor to start last season. Like he was shooting like 14% from 3. It's insane. It was absolutely insane. But since that moment, he's shot like, I think, like 43% over his time with the Raptors back end and then Pacers. It's just like sometimes guys go through tough times. I believe in Gradey being an above average finisher on the whole going forward. So yeah, I mean, you guys try and do things. At 224T0125 says, seeing Davion's impact on this team in Orlando shooting woes, does a Suggs IQ swap down the line make a lot of sense for both teams? I'll say this right now. Orlando is not doing that. Jurassic Snark said, quote, how should we judge the front office based on their trade deadline decisions this year? They have a history of not making deals, then losing players for nothing. I guess that's Fred. But maybe opening cap space is worth it this time around. Yeah, I think what is likely, and I guess we'll talk about the Bruce Brown stuff right now. If they aren't able to get in the middle of a 3-team deal, which is being reported by everybody. It was Doug first, but everybody now is kind of reporting that the Raptors are very openly kind of being like, hey guys, you guys need some money to facilitate a trade? Can we get in the middle here? Somebody want to give us some picks for being helpful? Hello, I'm available. Like that's a real thing they're doing, of course. But if they're not able to do that, nobody wants to nobody wants to trade for Bruce on his own, rather than like, it's a 3-team trade and Bruce is coming over and it helps, we'll see. But I think Bruce, there's a strong likelihood that if that doesn't happen, he would be bought out and he would forego some of that salary, or, there'd be a way to circumvent like that kind of stuff. Like, I don't think a buyout is out of the realm of possibilities for Bruce. As crazy as that sounds, for $22.5 million or $23 million, whatever he's on, that's a real thing. That's a possibility. So that's the Bruce stuff. But like, there are no teams that are super locked in on Bruce for Bruce. Bruce is a big ballast of salary and a decent player who would just hopefully end up on a team and end up on a team and, be able to provide a more as like a pleasant surprise, maybe rather than like their focused asset that they got at the deadline or something like that. D Donkey says, we've seen a decent amount of Olynyk and Pirtle playing with Barnes. Which center style, not necessary player, do you think is the better match with Scottie's skill set, i.e. classic big versus stretch big that lacks rebounding / interior defense skills? And then also from John Jerk, if a compelling offer for Pirtle got the Raps to trade him, do you think there might be value in taking DeAndre Ayton off Portland's hands as a longer-term placement or replacement? So, okay, here's the thing. I am a firm believer in stretch bigs being overrated and the fact that there's hardly any of them. And it's like the idea of a stretch big is talked about as available so much more so than it is available. And I don't know, like I was watching the Paris game. Pascal has 21, 10, and 3 right now. He's plus 15. Miles Turner is 2 of 7 from downtown. What they started doing against the Spurs, because obviously Wemby had 5 blocks and changed a million shots in the first game, and the Pacers are beating the brakes off of the Spurs. The change that the Pacers kept going to was that elbow alignment with Pascal and having, Turner kind of drag Wemby away from the rim. Turner is a real stretch big. He's one of the guys. He can draw closeouts. He can put the ball on the floor afterwards. He can shoot the ball. In this specific matchup, a stretch big was actually really, really important. Like really, really important, because you have to keep Wemby away from all of Pascal's handlings and all that kind of stuff. So as far as the Raptors, if Scottie is going to continue, and that's been a huge part of this, pocket of games, catch on the low block, or it's mostly the low block. It's not often the elbow. If he's going to keep catching there are going to be some teams who are able to nullify that to some degree. And Wemby is a huge, like the Spurs would be a team who can do that, perhaps. But I think mostly stretch bigs, in my mind, are overrated and are mostly hypothetical. It's like you're mostly playing smaller players. You're mostly getting killed on your defensive glass. You're mostly like you're doing all this other stuff. I think that it is more effective to have a good big who is able to screen, rebound, and finish. And like Jakob does all of those things, but Jakob is definitely not a stretch big, but he also goes so far the other way. He's one of the worst free throw shooting bigs. He has like basically no range beyond 14 feet. Like there's just nothing, right? So Jakob is very aggressively the other way. But I think people kind of fetishize the idea of a stretch big. Like there's 4 or 5 guys, but that's it. And it's like, can you get that guy? Probably not. Can you draft that guy? I don't know. Khalil Ware just got drafted, and I think he'll be a stretch big. He reminds me of Christian Wood a little bit when I watch him. And Christian Wood was so talented, but the talk on Christian Wood was always that he was like he didn't do very well to understand coaching, and that like he had a tough time kind of implementing himself in that regard, so that he was frustrating. But Christian Wood, the player, the talent is unbelievable. Khalil Ware, the player, the talent is unbelievable. I think stretch bigs are mostly hypothetical. There's a few of them, but Phoenix Plays E says the last time we had a stretch big, we won a title. I guess. Like, I don't know. Precious Achua was hitting 44% on his catch and shoot threes. He was playing fantastic defense in like he did a good job shooting the ball down the stretch of 2021-22, and they didn't win the title. Like he also boogied and woogied on Joel Embiid, right? Like Marc Gasol, the most important thing for Gasol as a player for why they won the title was the fact that Gasol had really active hands and he could actually get out and play hedge and recover defense on Steph Curry. So, but like also, yeah, Mark in 2018-19, he shot 38% on his threes on 3.7 per game. 2019-20, Mark shot 18% in the playoffs. But yeah, like Mark, he had that, just like a beautiful run. But Gasol, it was the shooting to some degree, yes. But Mark's shooting was not what won them. That's not what won them the title, in my estimation. Not in the slightest. Mark could have not shot the ball that well, and I think they would have won the title. It was his defense. He was incredible, and he also like played, I think, a fantastic, he was really great as a hub. He did such a good job moving the ball on. He set screens. They could run like high-low stuff, like which you can do with a lot of bigs, but Mark is that next level of passer from that position. But most importantly was that Mark was so good, so good as the low man, so good stepping up and providing hedge with active hands, recovering. And super, super impressive. So impressive. Yeah, that's like Mark is a special player. He's so fun. And yeah, also Ibaka was on that team too. Like, you know, LA won the next year, mimicking the Twin Towers thing with bigs. And Anthony Davis had an outlier shooting performance in the 2019-20 playoffs. But like Javon McGee and Dwight Howard didn't shoot the three. It was like the Raptors won because they had a lot of shot making from Kawhi, most of all. Pascal Siakam, Kyle Lowry, those three huge. Serge provided a ton of shot making, but Serge, what he was able to do, like he hit a couple threes and the big three, obviously over Ben Simmons, I believe, against Philly. But what Serge did was he bullied for jump hooks on the inside and he gave them extra possessions. He just dominated that way. And Gasol, he did hit some threes. Like, I don't know what percentage he shot in the finals, but I'm waiting for it to load on what percentage he shot against the Bucks. But 2 for 7 game 1, 0 for 2 game 2, 4 for 8 game 3. That's that big overtime win. 3 for 6 game 4, 1 for 4 game 5, 2 for 2 game 6. Like a really nice stretch of shooting, but not even that dominant, quite frankly. But yeah, it was the defense, man. And Serge, God, I love watching big teams. Like that Raptors team playing Gasol at the 5. Like, oh my God, think of this lineup, right? Gasol at the 5, Serge at the 4, Pascal at the 3, Kawhi at the 2, Kyle at the 1. You sick bastards. That's insane. There's not an inch to move on the court. And when they played the 76ers, and the 76ers had Joel Embiid, they had Ben Simmons, Tobias Harris, Jimmy Butler, JJ Redick. Oh my God. Just two massive teams bashing and smashing into each other. Holy moly, dude. That playoff run. Oh, you got me thinking about it, man. Just whew. Jeez. So good. So good. That was so much fun. Oh my God. Yeah, very fond thoughts of that team. Jeez. But I guess, yeah, to get back to the point, like Pirtle is so far going the other way. But I guess the crux of it is like, do you want a center who can draw closeouts? Yeah, you do. Because you want to max out on these things. But it's the fact that it's the fact that you have to, there's a trade-off usually. And like there's very few players who don't make you trade off. Wemby is, you don't have to trade off anything. Miles Turner, he's been better defensively lately, but he was overrated defensively for like years. He was never that good, and his pick and roll defense completely fell apart. I'm not being a hater. I cover the Pacers with Caitlin Cooper. We watched the film, and I've seen a lot of Miles Turner. It's gotten better lately, but like, wow. That defense, there's a huge trade-off. But Miles is a really great offensive center. He shoots the 3. He pumps and drives. He can make reads sometimes. He's really strong, but there's usually a trade-off. Porzingis, there's a trade-off. Why did the Raptors beat the Celtics? Because the Celtics played drop defense against Scottie Barnes, and they allowed him to step into the lane repeatedly. And they do the same thing against RJ Barrett. And, if you can only play drop, which is all Porzingis can do, there's a limitation there. Like Porzingis obviously won the chip, and he's a big reason for that in some regard. But yeah, Donkey says just trade for Wemby, problem solved. Maybe pivot to Chet if the Spurs are hesitant. Yes, big time. I agree with that logic as well. And Devin Landry says schemes have a lot to do with it. Sometimes coach tells you to drop, you drop. Yes, agreed. Like, yeah, of course. Players don't drop of their own volition, but like coaches know what players can and can't do. Like Marc Gasol for a series played hedge and recover against Steph Curry. Marc Gasol was not a hedge and recover big. He found it, but he's mostly a drop big. And like coaches know what bigs can do. Like I guess Raptors report says Porzingis can't play at the level of the screen. No, not like very well. And if he does, it requires like a lot of gap help from the rest of the Celtics. Like they have to load up completely, and you have like some of the spray passers who are able to like dissect that if they want. But no, Porzingis does not play at the level of the screen well. In my mind, like he plays not just drop, but like deep drop. He's super limited because he can't turn his hips fast. He's got very slow feet. Like Rudy is a guy about that size, and Rudy has pretty quick feet for his size, and can turn his hips pretty quickly. So he always did better in isolation than people thought. But yeah, Raptors report says I think almost all teams need to help a center at the level of the screen. Dude, Porzingis plays drop and he struggles at the level of the screen. Like there's a difference between needing like Derek White to basically play like next, like be nexting over to take the defender, and like as far as asking Porzingis to guard at the level of the screen, it's like how much do you have to step up? Are you like at the hash mark? Are you playing low? Are you stepping up like above, like into above the break space, and then like allowing the cut behind, but needing the low man to rotate over? Like maybe it's Horford. It's different. Like if you bog down every single conversation in like, I guess like what the off ball defenders are doing. Yes. But yeah, like some centers need more help. Some centers need less help. And Porzingis, if they ask him ever to step up, which is very rare, then he needs a lot of help. But the really unique thing about a guy like Mark was that they didn't need that much help. But if they did, they had, Pascal and Kyle and those types of guys, which what a crazy team that was. But yeah, mostly you have to trade off. This has gone way far field, but mostly you have to trade off like some of the classic like screening, finishing, defense, closing out possession style of center big man play if you want to be able to garner or be able to put more shooting on the floor, whether that's via playing a smaller big or whether that's via playing, a big who shoots and focuses on other aspects of the game. Like the Raptors, for example, Jakob Poeltl, they had a long stretch where they were defending better with Jonathan Mobo on the floor. Why? Because the Raptors have struggled containing ball penetration, and Jonathan Mobo could play switch defense and kick guys out. And so shot charts changed dramatically when Jonathan Mobo was on the floor. What happened over time? Jonathan Mobo couldn't rebound the basketball and couldn't even help out. Like the Raptors struggled so much to close out possessions, also because of a switch scheme that allows breakdowns on the back end. You have to have a smaller player boxing out a bigger player because a guy like Jonathan Mobo is obviously playing, switch defense at the point of attack and doing well. And that's just Jonathan Mobo as an example defensively. He obviously doesn't shoot very well at all. Yeah, usually you have to trade stuff off. And I'm of the mind usually that I will take a really strong regular center over an idealized version of like a stretch big. However, I mean, if you have one of the truly special stretch bigs, you're in the money because some guys really can do it all or can do most of it. And that's like a really special thing because it really can change the complexion of what the defense tries to do. And, there's not two sides of the floor in a basketball game. It's all one side of the floor. It all bleeds into one another. So, yeah. Al Sam says Mobo out of the rotation lately. Yeah. Talked a little bit about that with Trey as well. Dindis asks, is this the most important draft in Raptor history? Probably not. I think what would be the most important draft in Raptor history? Like, this one's really important. They have to get this right 100%. But 2016, probably, right? They get Jakob at 9, who's the biggest piece of the Kawhi trade outside of, I guess, the first. They get Pascal, who becomes an all-NBA player and all-star, hits the championship winning shot. Obviously, huge piece. And they get Fred VanVleet as an undrafted free agent. I think 2016 was, like, that's a radical. Think, like, getting those 3 guys, incredible. 2016 is probably the most important draft in Raptor history, if I had to guess. But this one is, I mean, LSM says Raptors 1998 draft. Yeah, Vince is a super big deal. Yeah, Vince is a super big deal. But this is one of the most important drafts in Raptor history because Scottie is one of the best players the Raptors have ever drafted. And you need to be able to put good players around him. And at some point, Scottie, he has 4 more years for sure in Toronto, unless he was like, no, you got to trade me, because sometimes that happens with players. But you have to put a team around this guy. Like, you really, really have to put a team around this guy. He's so good. And he deserves to have a team around him. So this draft is huge because you have to get, whether they're drafting at 7, whether they're drafting at 1, whether they're drafting at 9 or 4, they have to draft pretty well. You have to draft a star for Scottie to play with. Like, that's the level of get this right that is sitting on this team. Because if they blew this draft, it would be like almost incalculable. They'd have a big fall because they haven't had so many wins elsewhere, right? Like, for example, the Hawks, like, Dyson Daniels was drafted 6th, right? And New Orleans gave up on him, and then he's awesome. And on the same thing is, like, the Hawks are entertaining calls and stuff on DeAndre Hunter, who was 4th overall. The Raptors can't have DeAndre Hunter. Like, they can't even really have a Dyson Daniels. Like, well, who knows how Dyson develops as an offensive player, but, like, man, the Raptors need a huge win in this draft. It's one of the most important, for sure. Yeah. From Karma Police. Oh, this was a pretty good question. Do you think modern athletes are less experimental than prior generations? Have they and we as consumers become a bit too efficiency pilled? ? Perhaps underrating how more experimental athletes have pushed the sport forward. So, I'll say a quick thing from Donkey, who says, I remember hearing 21 was a top 4 draft. I'm not super tapped into draft stuff, but Suggs seemed to be a big favorite to go 4th. That was a huge pick going against consensus. Yeah, the 2021 draft was a top 3 draft, like, assuredly. And even the Raptors considered it a top 3 draft. They tried to trade into the top 3. The Raptors wanted Evan Mobley. They weren't able to do so. One of the trades that was talked about was Pascal being traded to move up into that draft. Obviously, they would end up selecting and making the best choice of the many players after those 3. Well, I guess Franz also is so sick as well. Franz rocks. He went, 7th? But or maybe Kuminga. Anyway, it doesn't matter. The Raptors were trying to get into the top 3. Most people consider it a top 3 draft, with Suggs being consensus the best of the rest, quote unquote. And that is Scottie and Franz for sure at this point. Trey Murphy and Alperen Sengun also look pretty awesome. Jalen Suggs will have, like, an awesome career, I think, but they made a great choice in that. And also, like, geez, I wonder what it looks like if they were able to get into the top 3, and Pascal got traded, like, super early, and it was right on the heels of his Tampa season, right? So the torn labrum, the surgery, the bubble, all that kind of stuff, who knows? But yeah, to the point about modern athletes being less experimental and, kind of like beautiful play versus efficient play, I don't think that has as much of an effect on, basketball as it does on, like, soccer, football, because this is, like, the incredible wing play that kind of defined the soccer that I watched growing up, and the soccer that a lot of people watched growing up is, like, just these incredible, like, the flair, Brazilian soccer, basically, right? And now it's like total football. Now it's a lot about, like, sprinting, getting into lanes, changing the defense, being efficient, like, the teams that are in the lower leagues, in, not the Premier League, but lower than that, who they try and play, some guys, like, 45 and 45. Like, you don't want to play more than 45 because we want you sprinting so much. We want you to apply pressure. We're going to score from pressure, rather than like, having this like the snake move and like, megging somebody or something like that and getting into the middle and, having a bunch of moves to get and then like a little drop off pass or something like that. Like the dynamism that was displayed by a lot of the top notch wingers from like the 90s through to the 2010 maybe. That's changed a lot in soccer. Like there's not as much skilling on ball anymore. But what happened with the NBA is I think there's a lot more skilling on ball. Like the carry / double dribble stuff is a lot more lax. As far as like that stuff is a lot more lax. On ball shooting on ball shooting has really ratcheted up. And like Lewis wrote this great piece at the 538 about how like the step back jumper had become a little bit of a hack because it seems like a difficult shot, but it's not, because players just use it as a means to like gather themselves and they get comfortable and they put so much work into it that it's like such a scripted move for them that a lot of players, like a lot of players, they do such a good job of finding their spot and like busting out crazy moves to get to it. Like even Wemby is this all-ending player defensively who passively changes everything. But just the other day he like stepped into the lane and threw the ball off the glass and caught it for a dunk. I think that's a thing in soccer for sure. They're going through an efficiency of movement thing. And like the NBA also has like an efficiency of shot location thing. But a star player in soccer with 11 guys on the field, it's just not the same as a star player in the NBA. Star players are able to they can just change the game any which way they want. And so there's a lot of room for skilling, freestyling, all that kind of stuff. It's a damn good thing. It's a really impressive thing. The NBA, as far as like skill and freedom of freestyling and all that kind of stuff, I think it's in a super, super strong spot. That feels like a podcast. Yeah, guys. I think that's probably a podcast. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Like, go after it's done, go comment, because apparently that's good for the algorithm. Also, yeah, make sure to like it. There's like 100 and some people in here. Like the video, all that good stuff. It helps other people watch this. And honestly, enjoy the game against Atlanta tonight. Maybe a 4-game win streak. Wouldn't that be kind of absurd? We'll see. 5-1 over 6. I know that would be like heartbreaking and I understand why some people want to tank, because as I just said, this draft, they need that running mate for Scottie. And what better way to guarantee a running mate for Scottie than to get a guy like Cooper Flag next to him, right? It's just, yeah. And to the point, like Raptors report also says, there's also a higher success rate and a high volume of possessions in the NBA. Yes, the NBA is considered one of the most dependable sports it's not as much anymore because of the variance of the 3-point shot, but it for a long time was one of the most dependable sports to predict winners because the high volume creates more dependable, stuff going forward. And yeah, it's just higher success rate, higher volume of possessions, less randomness. Really great point for that. So you can just kind of let guys do whatever the hell they want. Now, of course, I'm supposed to be ending the podcast, but of course, the NBA is looking for where they can cut corners all the time. Like the turnover differential stuff that the Raptors were actually at, close to the forefront of, that's become a huge thing in the NBA. And teams always want to be as efficient as possible, but you're never, ever, ever going to be able to look an NBA star in his eyes and tell him like, you don't get to do this stuff. NBA stars do whatever they want, man. That's just how it goes. All right. Thank you everybody for listening in. Once again, like, comment, subscribe. There's timestamps if you joined late and you want to go back and watch. I'll have the timestamps up probably in like 20 minutes or something like that. Thank you for listening in. And yeah, Raptors report pulling me back in. Yes, exactly. Okay. Thanks everybody for popping in. Go buy some axe, some Raptors axe. You get a little logo on it. Smell like sea mist and grapefruit, all that good stuff. Okay. Thanks everybody. Much love. I'll see you later, whether you got into this in the morning or at night. Have a blessed day and goodbye.